What do most men get completely wrong about size? I'll tell you, they're measuring the wrong thing entirely. And after more than 15 years practicing urology right here in the United States, I've sat across from hundreds of men. Young guys in their 30s, middle-aged men in their 40s, and especially men over 50, who walked into my office carrying this exact weight on their shoulders. Some of them hadn't been intimate with their partners in months. Some had avoided dating altogether. And almost every single one of them was stressed about the wrong thing. I'm Dr. Lily Harper. I'm a board-certified urologist. And today I'm going to give you the truth, not what you heard in a locker room when you were 16, not what some algorithm-fed social media post told you last week, and definitely not what the adult entertainment industry has spent billions of dollars trying to make you believe. Real science, real data, real answers, and I'll tell you this right up front. What the research actually shows is going to surprise you. It surprised a lot of my patients too. So stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to see yourself and this whole topic completely differently. Before we get into it, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from today. I genuinely love seeing where all of you are tuning in from across the country and around the world. It also helps more men find this kind of information, the kind they desperately need but are usually too embarrassed to Google, let alone ask their doctor about. All right, let's get into it. Here's the myth that has haunted men for decades. Bigger is always better. That one phrase has fueled entire industries, destroyed confidence, and broken up relationships. Men have spent real money, taken real risks, and carried real shame, all because of a myth. But here's what the science actually says, and I want you to hear this clearly. Most women prefer average, not extreme, not enormous. Average. That is not my personal opinion. That is what the data shows consistently across multiple well-designed studies. And the way those studies were designed is actually what makes them so powerful, because they didn't just ask women what they preferred. They looked at what women actually chose when nobody was watching and no one was judging them. Let me walk you through this the way I would if you were sitting in my exam room. I've been practicing urology for over 15 years. I've worked with men from all walks of life, veterans, teachers, guys who work construction, retired CEOs, you name it. And the one question that crosses every demographic, every age group, every background is the same. Am I enough? Every single time, I tell them the same thing. Let's look at the facts, not the fears, because the facts, it turns out, are a whole lot more reassuring than the story most men have been telling themselves. The research I'm going to share with you comes from studies that analyzed millions of dollars worth of purchasing data, best-selling products, and women's anonymous choices. These are behavior-based studies, not surveys where women feel social pressure to give a certain answer, but real-world choices made in private. When you remove the audience, when you remove the judgment, when it's just a woman making a personal decision for herself, the data tells a very clear story. And that story is not what most men expect. Let me break this down into 5 powerful truths. Each one dismantles a mistake that men, especially men over 50, commonly make when it comes to thinking about size. The first mistake is believing that women want extremes. Most men, if they're being honest, assume women are fantasizing about something in the 10, 11, or 12-inch range. That's what movies imply. That's what certain corners of the internet would have you believe. But when researchers actually looked at best-selling intimate products across 8 major distributors in the US, here's what they found. The most popular sizes ranged from 4 to 6 inches in length. Let me say that again, because I want it to land. 4 to 6 inches. That is not extreme. That is squarely average. And when they looked at girth, the circumference, it was also within the normal range, typically less than 4.5 inches around. Now think about what that means in practice. When women are making completely private personal choices, no partner watching, no expectation to perform a certain reaction, the overwhelming majority are choosing average sizes, not because they're settling, because that's genuinely what feels best. And there's a clear biological reason for that. The average depth of the vaginal canal is about 3 to 6 inches when relaxed. With arousal, it expands some, but not dramatically. Going significantly beyond that range doesn't create pleasure. It creates discomfort, sometimes pain. Women's bodies are not designed to accommodate extremes, and no amount of cultural myth-making changes basic anatomy. There's also an emotional layer here that I think gets overlooked entirely in these conversations. When a woman feels physically safe and comfortable, she can be emotionally present. She can relax. She can actually connect with her partner. But when there's pain or the anticipation of pain, her nervous system does the opposite. It guards, it tenses, it pulls back. Comfort is the foundation of real intimacy. And comfort is built on fit, not size. Here's the practical takeaway. About 90% of men fall within the normal size range. If that includes you, and statistically it almost certainly does, you are already more than capable of giving your partner what she actually needs, not what the internet told you she needs, what she actually needs. The second mistake is thinking length matters more than girth. This is the one that surprises people the most. And honestly, it's the insight I wish more men knew about earlier in their lives. A separate analysis of best-selling realistic products on Amazon and top US retailers found that the average length was about 6.5 inches, slightly above average, but not by a dramatic margin. Here's what's more important though. Researchers consistently found that circumference and overall comfort mattered significantly more than length. Girth, how wide something is, was the more meaningful variable in terms of what women actually responded to. Biologically, this makes sense. The nerve endings most responsible for female pleasure are concentrated in the outer third of the vaginal canal and the surrounding tissue, not deep inside. Length that goes far beyond comfortable depth doesn't reach more nerve endings. It just causes discomfort. Girth, on the other hand, affects sensation in the areas that are actually most sensitive. Now, here's where I want to address something directly, because I see this confusion in comments all the time. Some of you have heard 5.5 inches is average, and now you're hearing 6.5 inches is normal, and you're thinking, which one is it? Fair question. The answer is that these numbers come from different study designs and different sample populations. The scientific consensus puts average erect length somewhere between 5.1 and 5.5 inches. The 6.5-inch figure that shows up in product data reflects what women chose in a consumer context, which skews slightly above average because people tend to aspire slightly upward even in anonymous settings. The key point that doesn't change regardless of which number you're looking at. Neither of these figures is extreme, and extremes are not what women are choosing. What does this mean for you practically? It means that the obsession with inches is pointed at the wrong variable entirely. Rhythm, communication, reading her cues, being present. Those things matter 10 times more than any measurement. I've had patients who were incredibly self-conscious about their size and became extraordinary partners because they learned to pay attention, communicate, and be genuinely present. That's what creates satisfaction, not a number. The third mistake is comparing yourself to what you see in media. I don't think I need to spend a lot of time explaining what the adult entertainment industry does and why. Most of you already know. It selects for extremes because extremes are visually dramatic on camera. It's a performance, not a documentary. But here's the problem. Decades of exposure to that content, even casual or accidental exposure, rewires what men think normal looks like. And it creates a comparison that was never fair to begin with. The scientifically established average for erect length is 5 to 5.5 inches. For girth, it's about 4.5 to 5 inches around. That's the real distribution of men in the real world. The performers you see on screen are extreme statistical outliers. They were specifically selected because they are outliers. Comparing yourself to them is like watching an NBA highlight reel and feeling bad that you can't dunk from the free throw line. It's not a relevant comparison. Here's what I want all of you to really hear though, especially those of you who have been carrying this for years. When you believe you're not enough, it doesn't stay in your head. It shows up in your body. It shows up in your energy before and during intimacy. It shows up as hesitation, as self-consciousness, as pulling back emotionally right when you should be leaning in. And confidence, not inches, not measurements, not anything you could buy online. Confidence is the single biggest driver of satisfaction for both partners. I've seen this play out in my practice over and over again. The men who learned to let go of the comparison and show up with presence and confidence transformed their intimate lives in ways that had nothing to do with size. Stop measuring yourself against an industry that was specifically built to profit from your insecurity. Real women in real relationships are not comparing you to that. They're responding to you, your presence, your attention, your confidence, your care. The fourth mistake is ignoring what women's real, unfiltered feedback actually shows. Here's something that comes up in the research that I find genuinely fascinating. When women are surveyed directly, and they know they're being surveyed, their answers sometimes skew toward larger preferences because there's social performance involved even in anonymous surveys. But when researchers analyze actual behavior, what women buy, what they choose, what they return to repeatedly, the story is consistently different. They choose average length. They choose comfortable girth. They choose products that feel good over products that look impressive. I also want to address a point that comes up in conversations like this one, because I think it deserves a direct answer. Some people push back and say, well, don't extremes feel better for some women? And the honest answer is, yes, individual variation exists. Human sexuality is not one size fits all, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But we're not talking about individual exceptions. We're talking about population-level data. And at the population level, the data is remarkably consistent. Average is preferred, average is chosen, and average is what feels best for the majority of women the majority of the time. If you're in the average range, which again, about 90% of men are, you are not at a disadvantage. You are exactly where the data says most women want you to be. There's something else I want to say here that goes beyond the numbers. When a woman chooses something for herself, something private, personal, just for her, and she consistently chooses average, that tells you something real about what her body actually responds to, separate from any social script. That's about as honest a data point as you can get. The fifth mistake, and I'd argue the most important one, is believing that size equals satisfaction. This is the big one. This is the belief that underlies all the other mistakes, and it's the one that does the most damage. Because it's simply not true, and the research is unambiguous about this. Women's experience of pleasure and satisfaction is primarily driven by three things: clitoral stimulation, emotional bonding, and physical relaxation. Not size, not length, not girth. The clitoris, the primary center of female pleasure, is mostly external. It is not located deep inside the vaginal canal. It is not more stimulated by larger sizes. In fact, the nerve-rich areas most associated with female orgasm and pleasure are all in regions that are accessible to any man in the average range. Biology, in this case, is not working against you. It's working with you. On the emotional side, and this is where I've seen the biggest transformations in my patients over the years, what makes a woman feel truly connected to her partner isn't a measurement. It's whether she feels seen, whether she feels desired, whether she feels respected and safe. Those things are entirely within your control at every age, regardless of any physical attribute. In fact, I'd argue that men over 50 have a genuine advantage here that younger men are still working toward. Patience, wisdom, the ability to slow down and actually be present instead of rushing, the emotional intelligence that comes from lived experience. Those qualities are deeply attractive, and they translate directly into intimate connection in ways that raw physicality simply doesn't. I want to pause here and speak to something real, because I know some of you watching this have been carrying this particular insecurity for a long time. Maybe it started in adolescence, a comment someone made, a comparison you couldn't help but make. Maybe it's gotten louder as you've gotten older, as bodies change and confidence sometimes wavers. Maybe you've pulled back from intimacy or avoided it altogether because you were afraid of being judged or found lacking. I want you to hear this directly from someone who has spent 15 years working with men on exactly these concerns. You are not broken. You are not less than. You are enough. The data says so. The biology says so. And frankly, the thousands of satisfying, connected, intimate relationships that average men have every single day say so too. Age doesn't take that away from you. In a lot of ways, it gives you more. Slower is better. Presence is better. Attention is better. And those are all things that come with time and experience. Now, I also want to address something that doesn't come up enough in videos like this, and it came through clearly in comments from people watching content like mine: the relationship between physical intimacy and emotional connection. Some of you have strong feelings about this. The idea that good sex and deep love are separate things, that you can have one without the other, that technical skill and emotional intimacy operate on different tracks. And honestly, there's truth in that. They're not identical. I've had patients tell me that their most technically satisfying experiences were not with their long-term partners, and their deepest emotional bonds didn't always translate into explosive physical chemistry. That's real, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't. But here's what I've observed clinically over and over. When both tracks are working, when physical comfort and emotional safety are present together, that's when people report their most consistently satisfying intimate lives. Not the most dramatic single experience, but the most reliably good, sustainably fulfilling intimacy over time. And that combination is absolutely achievable for men at every age, in every body, at every size. So let me give you 3 concrete things you can actually do with everything I've just shared. First, stop comparing. I know that's easier said than done, especially in a world that is constantly throwing imagery and messaging at you designed to make you feel inadequate. But the data is clear. The vast majority of men are average. The vast majority of women prefer average. The comparison you've been making to media, to rumors, to whatever mythology you've picked up over the years was never an accurate or fair comparison. When you catch yourself going there, redirect. Come back to the facts. Second, invest in confidence, not anxiety. Confidence isn't arrogance. It's not pretending to be something you're not. It's comfort in your own skin. It's showing up fully instead of holding back because you're afraid. Women pick up on that energy immediately, both the self-consciousness and the confidence. The single most impactful thing most of my patients have been able to change about their intimate lives wasn't physical at all. It was the story they were telling themselves about whether they were enough. When that story changed, everything else followed. Third, build real connection. Learn to read her signals, ask questions, communicate openly about what feels good and what doesn't. Prioritize her comfort and her trust. These are learnable skills. They get better with practice, and they matter infinitely more than any measurement ever could. When you do those 3 things consistently, you stop asking, "Am I enough?" because you start experiencing the answer directly, through connection, through presence, through the kind of intimacy that actually satisfies both people involved. I want to close by saying this. Science shows clearly and consistently that most women prefer exactly what you already are. It's not about chasing extremes. It's not about measuring up to some fantasy that was manufactured to sell you something. It's about showing up fully, with confidence, with care, and with genuine presence. Those are things every man at 50, at 60, at 70, and beyond can build and strengthen. If this gave you something useful today, hit that like button, subscribe to Dr. Lily Harper for more honest men's health content, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because the truth is, intimacy isn't about numbers, it never was. It's about connection, and that's something every one of you already has the capacity for. I'm Dr. Lily Harper. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Small shifts in how you think, the right information, and the right mindset. Those things can give you real freedom and real confidence, no matter your age, no matter where you're starting from.